So welcome everyone to the Society of Thoracic Surgeons General Thoracic Surgery Database monthly webinar. Today is Wednesday, March the 12th of 2025. So thanks everyone for joining today. On the call with me today from the STS side, we've got myself and Emily Conrad, Banu Yatsi, Carol Crone, Mira C. Honeycutt, Paul Meehan, and our GTSD Raleigh. For the agenda today, I'm going to provide my STS updates. If you were on last month's webinar, this should look pretty familiar to you, but we have such, good turnover here within the GTSD database. I'm going to repeat some of those updates from last month. Then we'll turn things over to Ruth for our data manager education. And today, Ruth is going to focus on abstracting lung cancer pathology reports. As usual, if you have any Q&A, please use the Q&A function to submit your questions, not the chat. Also, we do have the raised hand function enabled, so you're more than welcome to just ask your question. We'd love to talk to you. So just raise your hand and make sure that your microphone is enabled, and we'll unmute you, and we'd love to chat with you. So let's go ahead and kick off our STS updates. Congratulations to everyone. The spring 2025 harvest has officially closed. It closed on March the 7th. So I'm sure you all are happy about that. Just a reminder that the reporting period for that spring harvest includes the 3-year reporting period of January 1, 2022 through December 31st of 2024. So, yep. January 1, 2022 through December 31st of 2024. Also, the fall 25 harvest close date, our next harvest is scheduled for September the 5th at 11:59 p.m. Eastern time. And that reporting period for the fall includes OR dates of July 1, 2022 through June 30th of 2025. The March training manual is going to be posted by the end of this week, so be on the lookout for that. And just a reminder, once the spring 25 harvest analysis reports are posted, just a reminder that if you do have report related questions, to please send those to the STS DB help desk, and the email address is there. When you are submitting those questions, please check the analysis overview first, because a lot of those questions can be answered in that analysis overview. In that communication to the help desk, please always be sure to include your participant ID, include the reporting time period that you are inquiring about, fall 24, spring 25, just clarify which report you're looking at. And then, as always, screenshots are extremely helpful. So just keep those things in mind when you are submitting your report related questions once these spring 25 reports are posted. Speaking of submitting questions, when you are submitting clinical questions, I just wanted to touch on this really briefly. When you are submitting your clinical questions, please be sure that you are selecting the appropriate data version on the clinical question submission form. A lot of questions have been going to the 241 mailbox. So just know when you submit a question, based on the data version that you select, your emails are sent to certain folders within our FAQ mailbox. And since version 241 is no longer active, that's not a folder that's checked very frequently. So just keep in mind, if you've submitted a question and you haven't heard anything back, please reach out, because a lot of times we're finding that the incorrect data version was selected and the questions are going to the incorrect mailbox. So again, when you're submitting your clinical questions, just ensure that when you click on this drop down for data version, that you're selecting general thoracic 5.21. We are in the process of, I'm working to get this drop down list updated. So what we're working to do is just put the current version at the top of the list. So if you go in, you'll see, once the drop down is updated, 521 will be the first choice for general thoracic, followed by 241. Adult cardiac, if you submit adult cardiac, you'll see that the current version will be at the top of the list, followed by 2.9. So we are working to get this cleaned up and reordered for your convenience, but also, just until that does happen, please ensure that you are selecting that correct data version when you submit your clinical question.
Can I make a comment before we move on, Leanne?
Yeah, sure.
Data managers too are sometimes sending questions to adult cardiac about general thoracic and vice versa. So please also make sure that you have the right registry. Melinda and I are pretty good about swapping questions back and forth with each other, but it certainly does add time to your responses both ways. And then the other thing I was going to mention is that if you have a clinical question, be sure that you're using this clinical question submission form and not sending your clinical questions to the help desk. They always forward them to the FAQ inbox, which is really helpful for me, but it again is an unnecessary step. So you can just send them straight, clinical questions straight to this FAQ inbox.
Thanks, Ruth.
Thanks.
No problem. All right. GTSD reporting updates. Again, I touched on this in last month's webinar, but for those of you that were not able to join last month or hadn't had a chance to review that webinar recording, or we may have some newer data managers joining us today. Just a reminder for the GTSD Spring 25 harvest, beginning with our Spring 25 harvest and moving forward, we'll have updates that will be implemented in both the participant reports and public reporting. So you will notice with the Spring 25 Harvest Analysis Report that comes out, there will no longer be the star rating graphics for the esophagectomy and lung resection composite measures. So we will continue to use the 3 category analytic descriptions, better than expected, as expected, and worse than expected. So basically, these star graphics will go away. And that 3, for example, this 3-star would be substituted with better than expected. The 2-star, instead of seeing a 2-star graphic, you would see the text as expected. So just keep that in mind when you're getting your Spring 25 reports and forward, that star rating, the actual star rating graphic will no longer be displayed. And that's the same thing goes for the public reporting website. The star rating graphic will go away, but the text will remain. AQO update. Not much to report in terms of new news from last month. Just a reminder, the GTSD and CHSD sessions will be held Thursday, October the 2nd. The ACSD session will be held Friday, October the 3rd. And we will be at the Grand Hyatt San Antonio Riverwalk. So we're looking forward to getting back to San Antonio. I love that Riverwalk area. It's absolutely beautiful. The AQO session proposal form deadline is April the 18th, and there is a link. So there is a link out to the STS website for the AQO session proposal. So we would love for you to fill out a form and give us suggestions, ideas on a session you would like to see, or maybe even present at AQO. So we would love to have your feedback and get information on what you would like to have presented at AQO this year. We will be offering both the in-person and the virtual options as we've done in the past. And again, we'll share cost information with you as soon as we have it. So unfortunately, don't have an update right now, but cost information will be shared as soon as it's available. I've also included a link to the AQO Data Managers Meeting webpage. So you can feel free to go out there and check the website, for any additional updated information. Emily, did I miss anything on AQO?
I'm just going to address the first question here from Marissa. It says for AQO 2025, when is the poster submission deadline? And are posters going to be online presentations only or in-person presentations? So we don't have the submission site ready yet for the posters, but we are in the process of finalizing all the information with our virtual platform, which hosts that submission site. So my projected date for having the submission site on the website is May 20. So if we're able to do it earlier than that, we will, and we'll provide information on our, all streams of communication. But that's my projected hope for a date is May 20 for that submission deadline. Or I'm sorry, that's the submission. That's not the deadline. That's the open. And then the deadline would be in late June. So from May 20 to June 24. Posters, we're going to have both an online and in person. There was some feedback that attendees liked to see the posters in person. So we're going to bring that back. But since we also do have virtual attendees, we would like to have a PDF or version of that poster so that we can post it on our virtual platform. And then also, if the abstract review committee deems your abstract, that would be an awesome one to see in person, there might be an opportunity for you to present your abstract at the conference. We did this in adult cardiac last year, and the presentations were about 7 minutes long with a couple minutes for questions. So that might be something that we would do. And Sheila asked, when will AQO poster presentation abstracts be due? The due date would be June 24th is my projected date. This is projections at this moment. That is not final. So we will provide the final information as soon as we officially know. Thank you.
Thanks, Emily. All right, and that's all of the updates I have for STS. Next, I'm going to turn things over to Ruth for our STS education, and she is going to be presenting on abstracting lung cancer pathology reports. So Ruth, the floor is all yours.
Okay, so this was a requested topic for us to cover. Thank you to the data managers who sent in sample pathology reports to use for this presentation. I very much appreciate it. Going to go to the next slide. There are our audience participation questions in this presentation, so hopefully all of you are in a place where you can participate. So this is the beginning of the data collection form for final pathological staging for lung cancer. You'll see that in each of these boxes describing the different pathological T stages, there is a lot of text describing how that T stage has been defined. The descriptions are intended to be educational for your awareness. Take pathology from the pathology reports. Do not create your own pathological staging based on the text in the boxes. So for example, if your pathologist has assigned a tumor as T1A, but you start reading through the descriptions and you think, well, really, this probably should have been a T1C. Do not abstract T1C unless you have first clarified with your pathologist and or surgeon that they made a mistake in their report. If they made a mistake in the report, they're going to go back and correct it, and there will be an addendum to your pathology report. So when you get audited, it will all match in the end. But it's very important not to assign your own pathological staging for these cases. It should be coming out of reports. Next slide. Just a word on sequence 1841, which is whether there's a tumor present. There are a couple of atypical types of cases that I very often get questions in the FAQ inbox about. Both of those types have been addressed in the training manual. I think what's a little bit tough with some of these sequences is you're not quite sure what sequence to look at for the answer to your question. So I just wanted to call out these couple of atypical case types. So the first is patients who've had neoadjuvant therapy with a complete response. When you look at the final surgical pathology report, it's going to often indicate like a Y for treatment, and then P for pathological T0. And there's not going to be any additional staging or a different pathological stage assigned to it. That's completely fine. You're still going to say that your patient has a tumor present so that you can answer the pathological staging questions, even though there really is no residual tumor left at the point that the lung was resected. The second atypical case type is sometimes a patient will have a wedge resection and then they have a lobectomy like weeks, months, days later in a completely separate encounter in the OR, so a complete separate trip to the OR. In that case, the wedge is diagnostic and you don't have to enter it. You do have to enter the lobectomy because that's the curative resection. You're going to end up using the final pathology report from the lobectomy plus the wedge in order to get all of the pathological staging information that you need for the therapeutic procedure. So you're going to say that you're going to have to answer yes to 1841 in order to open up all the pathological staging sequences to be able to enter that final pathology into the system. If you have any questions about either of those topics, please feel free to raise your hand or put a question in the chat. If you want to go to the next slide. So this is an example that was sent in by one of the data managers. This is a pathology report. I think what you will notice in this pathology report and in most pathology reports is that now there's these beautiful synoptic checklists inside of lung cancer pathology reports where it calls out a bunch of very important information about this person's lung cancer. And then always provides like a summary of the pathological T and N. And sometimes there is no M stage, and we'll address that. M as in Mary. Sorry, I know N and M sound alike. There's no pathological M stage for this patient, but we'll talk about that in an upcoming slide. So for our first question, how would you code lung cancer tumor present for this pathology report? A is yes, B is no, C is unsure. Leanne, remind me what I clicked to see the answers. I forget. You have to tell me every time. I'm sorry.
Oh, no, it's okay. I
You
think
want?
when I end poll, you should be
Oh,
able to.
okay, it'll pop up. Okay.
Yeah,
I can't see the answers coming in, so just end it whenever it's appropriate.
yeah.
Thank you.
Yep, no problem. We've got about 90. So we've still got only about half of the people or our attendees have responded. Give it just a little bit more time. Give it just a few more, getting better. All right, I'm going to go ahead and end it. And you should be able to see results now, Ruth.
Perfect. So the correct answer for this one is yes, there is tumor present. So you will notice if you look at this pathology report under tumor. So there's specimen and there's tumor. So it says there's a single focus of tumor. And then under tumor size, it says the total tumor size that was resected is 4 centimeters. And then you'll also notice if you look at the bottom of the screenshot that I grabbed that they've staged that tumor that was present, which segues nicely to the next slide, I think. Hopefully, yes. How would you code the pathological T stage for this same case? A is T0, B is T1A, C is T2A, and the last one's unsure.
We've got about half the people or our attendees have responded. So we've got a little bit of everything here. A little bit of T0, T1A, T2A, and some unsure, which is absolutely fine. Give it just a little bit. All right, we're going to go ahead and end it, Ruth, and you should be able to see.
Perfect. So for this one, the correct answer is T2A. So if you look at that bottom section, and for some reason my computer is like hiding the bottom for me, but you will see that there it says P. So on the left-hand side, it says PT category, and then it says PN category. So the pathological T stage is how they've staged the tumor. The N is how they've staged the lymph nodes. And in this case, they've called the tumor a pathological T2A. So that would be the correct value to abstract. And you're truly just going to take this from your pathology report in the summary. You should always have this information in your pathology report. If this information is not in your pathology report, that's a red flag that maybe this isn't a case you should be abstracting. And I always check with my pathologist or surgeon in that case when I don't have a summary that looks like a lung cancer summary. Okay, if you go to the next slide. So what about cases with multiple tumors? So this is one of the, I think, most challenging parts of abstracting lung cancer cases. So you first have to determine if your patient has synchronous primary tumors or if the patient has multiple tumors that are all related to the same primary, so metastatic disease. Sometimes this is really hard and you might have to call your pathologist or surgeon to help you understand. Oftentimes, this really can't be definitively determined preoperatively unless they happen to do biopsies of multiple lesions preoperatively, which they many times will not do if it doesn't look like the patient has lymph node disease. So in those cases, what they'll do is they'll do like a CT scan and they'll see like, this patient has, two tumors. They can either be in the same lobe or different lobes on the same side or different sides. And then unless they biopsy both masses, they don't really know, like, are these the same primary or could they be just two primaries that happen to occur sort of at the same time? And so oftentimes your surgeons will clinically stage the patient in two ways. They'll say this could be two stage T1A tumors, or this could be a more advanced stage tumor that's just metastasized. So you really have to dig into this with your pathologists and surgeons sometimes to figure out what the case ends up being in the end if you can't nail it down from your path report. And I think at this point, I'm going to share a pathology report that one of the data managers generously shared with me. So let me see if I can share that.
Yeah, I stopped share, Ruth, so you should be able to take over.
Can you see mine?
Not yet.
As I'm sharing.
There you go. Now what's up?
Okay. So this is a great example of a final pathology report where the patient ended up having, or they went into the OR knowing that they had multiple tumors. And then it was sort of, you had to dig through the pathology report to figure out, does this patient have synchronous primaries or just metastatic disease? So this pathology report is 6 pages long, which is pretty standard. They're usually like 6 to 8 pages long. Oftentimes they have many addendums, which can be very, it's a lot of work to just dig through all of the information in a pathology report at times. So usually where I start, honestly, is by skipping through all of this, like, kind of description of the specimen, and I just cut to the chase and get to my synoptic checklist. So you can see here that this patient, it says specimen, synchronous tumors present, total number of primary tumors, 2. And then the first procedure that they did was a wedge resection on the left. So they did a left lower lobe wedge resection, and there was 1 tumor in the left lower lobe wedge resection. And then they defined this tumor. So it was squamous cell, moderately differentiated, and the margins were positive for this lesion. They also sampled lymph nodes, and in the end, there was a positive lymph node. So they staged this tumor as T1B N2. And then this little M is for multiple primary tumors. So then they continue with their synopsis and they say, again, we have 2 tumors. And in this procedure, they did a left lingulectomy, which is a type of segmentectomy. And they ended up finding that this was invasive acinar adenocarcinoma. So you have 2 different types of primary lung cancer. It's easier. One of the easiest ways to determine that you have synchronous primaries versus metastatic disease is when the histologic types come back as 2 completely different types of histology. When they're the same, it becomes more challenging. So this was invasive acinar adenocarcinoma. Again, moderately differentiated. The margins on this specimen were negative. And then they assigned the lymph nodes to the previous resection. So this one was staged as T2B because the tumor was much larger. It was 4.6 centimeters versus the prior tumor was 2 centimeters. So then from here, I really wanted to know more about these lymph nodes that were positive because I was curious, were these lymph nodes positive squamous cell, or did they have, were the lymph nodes positive for adenocarcinoma? So then I go back to the sort of like details that I skipped over previously to start my investigative work. And if you start looking through the notes on the lymph node resections, you'll see that station 7 is the only station of lymph nodes that came back positive, and it was positive for squamous cell carcinoma. So the squamous cell carcinoma that was the smaller lesion is actually the lesion that had metastasized to the lymph nodes based on this pathology report. And I think that's, sorry for my wild scrolling, I think that's the bulk of what I wanted to highlight from this report. You'll see like in the gross description, there's tons more information. For the most part, you are just reading through your gross descriptions to make sure that they match your summaries and they're not giving you any additional questions. You're really going to take your total number of lymph nodes resected from your summary, and they've done that very well here. So 5 total lymph nodes resected, and they already gave you the stations. So the information that you need to abstract is very nicely put into the summary for you. If there's a discrepancy between the gross description and the summary, you would defer to the summary. If you feel like something seems wildly wrong, again, clarify with your pathologist and surgeon. Pathologists are super friendly. They love to talk to people. I think they're a little bit like radiologists, like they're just lonely with their microscopes. And so don't be scared to call your pathologist. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing and then we'll go back to the slides.
Okay, shared. All right. Can you see my screen?
I can. Yep, if you want to go to the next slide. Okay, so here's some training manual guidance on abstracting synchronous primaries, which is what that case turned out to be. If 2 or more tumors are dissected out during the same procedure, you're going to code the most aggressive disease noted on the pathology report, and then consultation with pathology may be necessary to determine which is the more aggressive. And then we just made a note that for pathology reports with multiple tumors, the designation of lowercase m is utilized, as you just saw in that report, where it was like MPT. The SCS doesn't currently capture that data point, so you just enter the T stage without the M, as in that example. If you want to go to the next slide, we're going to do some questions. I already did that. Next one. Okay, so the first question is, how would you code the pathological T stage for the case study that was reviewed? T1B or T2B, or you're not sure? Recall that the T2B lesion was the adenocarcinoma lesion that was larger in size but did not have lymph node metastasis. It was moderately differentiated. The T1B tumor was the squamous cell lesion, and it had N2 disease associated with it and a positive margin.
Emily, can you launch the poll? My poll button has like disappeared and I can't find I can't find it. Thank you.
Did you, sorry, the next poll is the number 3?
Yes, ma'am.
All right.
Oh, no, I'm sorry.
Number
It's
2?
It should be 4, right, Ruth? T21B should be the first answer, Emily.
Yeah, next one.
Yeah, I think it's Q4.
Yep, there you go.
There you go. Yeah, Q3. You're right. Thanks. Sorry, Emily.
No worries. Ruth, can you see how many people are answering now?
I can now. Yeah, thank you.
Great. Let me know when you want me, or you can end it as well
Oh yeah, thanks.
with the red button. Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and end it because it doesn't look like we've got many more answers coming in. So for this one, the pathological stage that should be captured would be the T1B. So you're trying to capture the more aggressive disease. And in this case, that T1B lesion, even though it's a little bit smaller, has already metastasized to this patient's lymph nodes, indicating that that squamous cell cancer is most likely to be the cancer that limits this patient's life expectancy. So when you think about linking this data back to 5-year survival data, what you're really trying to the information you're trying to convey is, you're trying to sort of link that data all together, right? So this disease was more aggressive and this patient's 5-year survival was X, Y, or Z. Okay, next slide.
I'm sorry. I just gave it away. Sorry. You sound like you
Sure.
didn't say anything.
What primary procedure would you enter for this case? The wedge resection, the segmentectomy, or unsure? Recall the wedge resection was for the oh goodness, now I can't remember. The wedge resection was for the squamous cell tumor, and the segmentectomy was for the adenocarcinoma.
Like, I can always pull over the path report, Ruth, if I need to. Just tell me where to go.
I think I
Okay.
said it correctly.
Okay.
I can actually probably pull it up on my screen to remind myself too.
Do you want me to end it?
Yeah, you can end it.
Okay.
Sorry, I could have probably ended
Oh,
it.
no, you're fine.
Okay, click over. So I would enter the segmentectomy as the primary procedure because it was the largest procedure performed. So it's challenging because I think as data managers, we want everything to sort of like line up and be all about the same tumor, but sometimes that's just not the case. So for example, sometimes your surgeon will clinically stage, will base their clinical staging on something, and then in the end, the pathological staging ends up to be very different, or they'll resect a tumor and things just turn out differently than they thought they were going to turn out. And so it's not necessarily always matched when you have multiple tumors being resected, which again is very unsettling, but is the way that it is currently. So you will always just enter your largest procedure as your primary procedure. Okay, pathological M as in Mary stage. I've gotten a lot of questions lately about pathological M stage. So the training manual says in the definition, indicate the appropriate descriptor for the lung cancer metastasis based on final pathology report, which is a little bit misleading, to be honest. There will be an update in the April training manual trying to clarify this a bit. Quite often, a pathology report is just going to say MX because metastatic disease was not assessed. If you think about that, it makes sense because oftentimes when lung cancer patients have METs, they're METs to other places, right? So a patient can have a therapeutic lung resection with a single MET to their brain or with a single MET to their adrenal glands. That patient still has metastatic disease that should be captured in pathological M stage. However, it's not going to appear in your pathology report because your surgeon did not submit to pathology at the time of the lung resection any portion of the patient's brain or any portion of the patient's adrenal gland. I just learned, actually this last week from Dr. Broderick, that really the intent of putting this here was so that if a patient went into the OR, presumably with no metastatic disease, and then during the lung resection, you find out that the patient has local metastasis that's newly discovered during this curative resection, that there's a way to capture that pathology from your path report, which is completely appropriate and very true. That's just not often the case. That happens very rarely. So for the most part, your pathology reports are going to say MX, unless you know that your patient went into the OR with, like I said, either like a solitary isolated brain or adrenal gland met. You're going to enter that as M0, which is the guidance given in the training manual. And again, I'll try to put some more verbiage in the training manual about that in April. I just have to think about like the best way to make it clear. It's complicated. Okay, lung cancer histology. So the data collection form gives you several options for lung cancer histology. Mixed is really intended to be used for a mixture of two separate histologies. So like if you have an adenocarcinoma / squamous cell mixed lesion, you would select mixed. Other is really for things that are not listed. Sometimes it can be really hard to know if you have a lung cancer case based on your pathology reports, because sometimes they lead you to believe that you don't have any of these options up above, nor do they lead you to believe that it's necessarily even lung in origin. This example was sent in by a data manager. You can see in the comment on this pathology report that the last sentence says, clinical correlation is recommended to rule out possible lower GI tract primary. If you want to go to the next slide, it's got the remainder of this path report. So you can see under histological type, it says enteric type adenocarcinoma for this patient that had a right lobectomy. I think what I have always found to be helpful is that if my pathologist chooses to put something that I'm like, if this wasn't in a lung template, I might question whether this is lung cancer or not. They put it inside of the lung template. They gave it lung cancer staging. You can see that they followed the AJCC 8th edition guidelines for their summary, the T1B, TN0. So in that case, I am fairly certain that this is a lung cancer case and I would include it. But again, if I'm ever questioning whether something truly is lung cancer or not, I'll ask my surgeon or the pathologist. Again, this sort of just says what I said, so we can probably skip it and just go to the next slide. It'll saved for posterity.
Oh, well,
Oh, that's all right.
that was supposed to not do that, but.
This is we can do the audience response question.
There you go.
If you have completed good job. No, if you have completed the final pathological lung staging sequences, should your primary category of disease ever be lung nodule or lung mass?
All right, I think we can end this one.
The answer is no. So if you have said yes to lung cancer and you've entered all of the lung cancer pathology information, you've done all of the work to get your pathological T and M and all those lymph node stations, then your primary category of disease should be a lung cancer primary category of disease. If you pick a lung nodule or lung mass primary category of disease, your case will be excluded from your analysis, which you really do not want. So be sure that if you're doing all of that work to answer the lung cancer staging, that you have also selected a lung cancer primary category of disease. And I think that is that.
Oh, look, it's over here for some reason. I have no idea what happened there. Okay, we do have questions, so let's go ahead and hop over and answer some of these questions. I'm going to skip around just a little bit. What if there is no T for staging?
If there is no T for staging, I would presume that it was a diagnostic procedure or not a lung cancer case. Based on your operative notes and your pre-op H&P, if that is not abundantly clear to you, you should ask your surgeon, like, hey, why doesn't this case have a pathological T stage? What happened? I assume you mean by no pathological T stage that is just completely not commented on, I guess. If it says YPT0, I would consider that as having a T stage and your patient just had a complete response to treatment.
See, let's go for the part solid nodules that are listed in our CT PET scans that have no solid portion measured. I know we leave the section blank for measurement, but as far as clinical staging, how do we stage this with no noted measurement for solid portion on either CT or PET noted by radiologist, and MD does not stage in notes or H&P?
Let me pull up that. Here, if you want to go to the next one,
I'll
I'll pull up the graphic for that.
Sure. So let's see your question. When will the new version of STS GTSD be released? So we are in the middle of an upgrade. We're working with the surgeon leadership on the upgrade. The plan is for the next version to go live January 1, 2026. So we would send everything to vendors by July 1, and then the version would go live January 1, 2026. That is, if everything continues to stick to my timeline. So that is the plan right now. Our next question, I don't know if Carol's available. These next two questions kind of go hand in hand. But why are the star graphics going away? And then why did the society decide to eliminate the star rating graphics for lung cancer and esophageal cancer composites, but not eliminate them for the star for ACSD cardiothoracic cases such as cabbages and valves? I can answer the thoracic, but I don't know if you wanted to.
Let me read the question again. Hold on.
Oh, so yeah, and it's a little hard to hear you. Sorry, it sounds a little muffled. I don't know if that's just on my end.
Can you hear me now?
That's better.
Okay.
Yeah, so why did the STS, why are the star rating graphics going away for GTSD, but not for ACSD cases such as cabbage and valves?
Sure. So I think the biggest concern in the GTS community was the low number of cases that are performed specifically and for these patients, specifically the esophageal cancer patients, and the low N maybe not quite not being represented through a star rating quite as STS was hoping that it was going to be perceived. So that was the decision on that one. And there's a presidential task force formed that reviewed the star ratings for all of the 32 are some reading the question, sorry. The presidential task force was convened and they reviewed all of the star ratings for all of the databases, and that was their leadership decision on that. For ACSD, quite strong statement, I think, to say, and perhaps it's also quite true that the star ratings for ACSD are really embedded in the cultures of the hospital. Getting away from the star ratings for ACSD wouldn't quite serve our community. And they serve since they're serving two different populations, the lung and esophageal cancer patients, and then also the adult cardiac surgery patients. For ACSD, two separate groups reviewed those. They came together during the presidential task force, and that was their decision. I know it's kind of a non-answer. But I guess the best I could say is for GTSD, for the lung and for the esophageal, it was felt that due to the low N, that it was probably best to get away from the star ratings and still report out how the site is performing in comparison to the rest of the STS, but not display it using stars.
Right. Yeah, and the work for our task force, they're still, exploring ways to enhance public reporting and harvest reporting. So so that is, it's an ongoing process of, not just taking it away, but how can we improve it? So there's ongoing discussions there. All right, thank you, Carol. Let's see, for the part solid nodules that are listed on our CT PET scans, you're looking,
Yeah.
did you have that? Or
Well, do you want to pull up page 114 in the training manual?
Yeah,
I think
sure.
that's probably the easiest.
Okay, yeah.
Versus me like flipping back and forth with sharing. Sorry.
Oh, no, you're good. So page 114?
I think it's 114. It'll be close to 114 if it's not exactly on your copy.
Excuse my angry scrolling there. T-stage, what is?
Keep going. It's got the graph. It's the big graphic with the blue
Gotcha.
circle.
There you go.
So if your surgeons are not giving you clinical T-stage and you don't know the approximate size of the solid part, it's going to be very hard for you to clinically stage the lesion yourself. You can use this graphic as a reference, which, you need the total tumor size, and to some extent you also need the solid lesion size. So, in the end, you may end up having to ask either a radiologist or a surgeon to give you the size of the solid portion. You can also check to see in your oncology notes if at any point there's a note in oncology that said what the clinical stage for this tumor was. But again, hopefully all of you can work with your surgeons to get clinical stage added to your pre-op H&P templates somewhere, so that this information is easier to find. If not, you'll have to just leave it blank. There's nothing you can do.
Right. 32% of our cases have more than 10 lymph nodes dissected. STS says the normal number of lymph nodes dissected is 1 to 10. Can you please change the normal range of number of lymph nodes dissected? Let's say 1 to 15 or 1 to 10.
We're working on this for the next version. It's a warning. You can just ignore the warnings. It's not gonna cause any harm to your data to ignore the warning, but I get that it is annoying.
Yeah, we can't change the range mid-version, but we've talked about it. We'll update that range for the next version. It's on our list. Same here regarding lymph node dissected and counting the stations instead of lymph nodes.
Oh, no, please don't count when it asks for the total number of lymph nodes and stations, enter the correct information. It's just a warning. It's not like a critical error. You can completely enter the correct number. It's just basically cueing you to go back and QC your data, because when the warning was created for this version, the thought was a surgeon abstracting more than 10 lymph nodes is atypical. And so we just want the data managers to double check that they've not like fat fingered a number or made a mistake. And so it's just a double check that you've entered the right number. Please do not enter stations instead of a number of lymph nodes resected. That's not the information that we're looking for in that sequence.
Entering the primary procedure is put where?
You're going to list your procedures, and then you're going to indicate which is primary. The sequence number, I do not know off the top of my head, but maybe Leanne has the sequence number memorized better than I do.
I do not have primary procedure sequence number memorized. I can pull it up though. Yeah, I can pull it up.
While you pull that one up, I can answer this one. So it says to code mixed is that if two types in the same tumor, yes. So like if it very clearly says like you have, I think the most common that I've seen is like an adenocarcinoma and a squamous cell, and it kind of just like glops itself together into a tumor that's a mixed pathology. Then you would choose mixed. You wouldn't select either adeno or squamous. You would, again, just select mixed. If it's something like not listed, then you're going to choose other.
And primary procedure is 1480. Thanks, Mindy. Yeah. Thank you, Kelly. Thank you. Let's see here. Let's see. Can we review how to count stations that list fragments and portions? Path report lists 40 lymph nodes, but most are fragments and or portions.
So fragments are only captured as one lymph node. So hopefully your pathologists are listing for you on separate lines how many fragments and how many whole lymph nodes they had for each station. If they say something like, if they're mixing those things together, then you're just going to have to enter that as a count of one. So for example, if the title is number of lymph node fragments / lymph nodes : 12, you're going to have to call that one, because you don't know how many whole lymph nodes you have versus fragments, and fragments are always counted as just one lymph node. If they give you station 7, number of lymph node fragments 12, station 7, number of total lymph nodes, 6, then you can take your 6 plus 1 for all of your fragments and call it 7.
Thanks, Ruth. Also, how are we documenting now that there are chemoimmunotherapy prior to surgery versus surgery being done first, then adjuvant? I think I read we use the initial diagnosis path from when the person received chemoimmunotherapy.
So that is in your pre-op history section. Let me grab
got
the
these.
sequences. It's called, I think it's
675.
640.
Chemo
640. Yeah, preoperative chemo. Oh,
Oh, here you go.
it's 650, I think.
Yeah, right here.
Yeah, 650. Oh, okay. Sorry, I'm scrolling up wildly on my own screen.
No, you're fine.
Sequence 650, I think, is preoperative chemotherapy, immunotherapy. So if your patient had preoperative chemoimmunotherapy for the lung cancer that they're resecting, you're going to say same disease. And if it was in the last 6 months, you're going to say less than or equal to 6 months. Or if it was more than 6 months from the time that the patient had chemoimmunotherapy and surgery, you'll say greater than 6 months. And the same thing with preoperative thoracic radiation. You're going to call it either same disease or unrelated disease and assign a time frame. And then you're correct for your clinical stage. You're going to enter the clinical staging information from prior to the patient having induction therapy.
Okay. Let's see. Natalie said, this is typically how our pathologists lift fragments, lymph node, level 7 dissection, multiple lymph node fragments, negative for tumor. What do we do in this situation? Thank you. I'm new and still learning.
Hey, Natalie, you're just going to count that as 1. So all you know is that you have a bunch of fragments. So equals 1.
Okay. All right. Let's see. Surgical record indicates a thoracotomy, but only for removal of left lower. I'm not, what is LLU? Play back to me.
I think left. I think she meant to say LUL, left upper lobe lobectomy.
I was like,
No
I don't know.
retractor.
Yeah, no retractors.
Yeah. If they enlarge an incision slightly to get the specimen out, then you don't have to capture that as a conversion.
Okay.
It happens sometimes.
And Ruth, do Hyler nodes belong to station 10?
Hyler nodes, hang on 1 second. I always look at my
In the
chart.
training manual?
This is the problem of like posting your charts on your wall, then you don't have it
Oh,
memorized.
that's okay. So while you're looking for that, there's a question from Sanja. That says, we're in the process of adding a new site for GTSD. Once completed, do we go back and enter 3 years worth of data? Or do we do last 6 months only? So I would start with your last 6 months and work backwards. It's important to remember when you get your report back, the reporting period is based on 3 years. So the STS numbers and the benchmarks are all based on 3 years worth of data. So when you're looking at your site compared to the STS, you need to remember that you can't make a direct comparison because if you're only looking at 6 months of data, you can't directly compare that to the STS 3 years of data. Does that make sense? I don't know if anybody wants to elaborate on that, if I understood Sanja. So you'd want to get, 3 years entered, but I would start with the most recent and then work backwards.
You want to go to page 120 in the training manual? We can answer the Hyler node question.
Absolutely. All right, did I close the training manual? Hope not. No, I did not. All right, 120. Ignore my scrolling.
You're gonna have to biggie size this one. Small font. You can go online and print any like lymph node diagrams off like this. I keep one on this like little flipper chart thing on my desk, but you can see station number 10 is identified as Hyler. So you are correct. 10 is Hyler, and then it'll show you on the diagram like where those are. Yep.
Yep. Perfect. All right. Okie dokie. I don't see any additional questions come in, but so we're waiting to see if anyone has additional questions. Our next monthly webinars are scheduled for April 9th and May 14th. Our next monthly webinar, we are going to do the data manager survey. So if you could please be sure to attend that data manager survey so we can get as much participation as possible. These data manager surveys are extremely helpful. I know the help desk gets a lot of requests for the results of these surveys. They're used to help new sites determine FTEs, expected amount of time for case abstraction. So if you could please attend next week and get as much, we'd like to have as much participation as possible for these data manager surveys. Mindy, when we were adding sites to STS, we were told cases could not be entered retroactive, and that they start when you start with STS. So I don't think that is correct. Paul, I don't know.
No, I was just going to chime in. That's not true. You can always enter old data. You can go back as far as you want and enter all your old data. And we recommend that you do. So, but Leanne suggested just right, start with your most recent data and start working backwards, so that you get more and more complete, because we know that'll take some time.
Yeah. And then you just have to ensure that all the surgeons that you're submitting that older data for
Yes.
on your Schedule A.
Yes.
Yeah. So yeah, you can always go back and enter and submit data retroactively for sure. Let's see here. Next from Nicole, for the adult cardiac surgery database, they have the landing page on IQVIA that shows that you have the 30-day percentages and whether you are green, yellow, or red. Any chance this will come with GTSD? It is so nice and much easier to review. Yes, absolutely. Actually, we are working with IQVIA. We're meeting with them next week. So we hope to deploy the CHSD community page next month. And I'll be, once that is available, on our webinar, we'll do a walkthrough of the community page and explain it, and so show you how it functions. So yes, we will be releasing that. Our goal is to release that next month in April. Let's see. We've got one more question. We've got another minute. Let's see, Ruth, for sequence 650, if the patient received radiation and chemo for previous lung cancer, should we say unrelated or same disease for current lung cancer?
You are likely going to say unrelated disease, assuming that this is a new primary lung cancer, and that's why you're entering the case.
And then if you're not sure, you can always submit an FAQ to Ruth. And all right. And just a reminder, I know I covered this earlier, for questions, you can reach out to me directly, help desk, reach out to STSDB_helpdesk@sts.org for all harvest questions, analysis report questions. And then if you have questions related to your STS participation agreement and contract, or STS contracts, invoicing, billing, anything like that, please reach out to STSDB@sts.org. If you're not sure who to contact, just send everything to the STSDB_helpdesk, except for clinical questions. Those should be submitted via the clinical question submission form. All right. I don't see any additional questions, Ruth, and we are right at the end of the hour. So thank you everybody for joining. We look forward to having you join us next month on the monthly webinar for the data manager survey. Thanks everyone. Thanks, Ruth. Excellent job.
Thanks, Leanne.
Thank you all.